HR needs you to tell the difference between these two chips. Nothing? How about now? What is a Centaur CPU? I mean, it certainly isn't the kind of thing you'd find on Newegg, so how'd we get our hands on one? I can't tell you that, but what I can tell you is that it is a prototype x86 CPU that fits into an Intel socket on this motherboard that doesn't work with an Intel CPU. It's not made by Intel, or AMD for that matter, and while it doesn't have much in common physically with a mythical beast, it very much is one. Just like our beastly sponsor.
iFixit. If your favorite old console is on the fritz, don't go replace it just yet. Give it a new lease on life with the help of iFixit. Check out their game console parts using the link down below.
We're gonna get to who Centaur is in a moment, but first, what is up with this motherboard? It's got an Intel socket, LGA 2011 V3 to be exact, but we were told by our anonymous source that you should not put an Intel CPU in it, so it's physically the same, but electrically completely incompatible. Kind of like when you see a USB port that's labeled RS-232. They've just reused the housing and the pins in order to save time and cost, but all the signaling is completely different. I have never seen that done with a CPU socket though. And the motherboard it's soldered to is a trip. There's normal stuff. You got what appears to be a quad channel memory configuration, just like we saw on the Intel CPUs that used this socket. Standard PC power inputs, PCI Express expansion slots, couple M.2 storage slots. Those were showing up on Intel around this time as well. But as we dig deeper, it is absolutely covered in jumpers and dip switches. And that is an indication that this is a development platform board. So with these, which I've been instructed not to touch, you can actually change the characteristics of either the CPU itself or the behavior of the motherboard depending on what you're trying to test. This was a weird one for me too. It's actually got one of those gamery segmented audio sub PCBs with a CD audio connector. Okay, now hold on a second. We need to take a closer look at this. Moving along the bottom, we've got a USB-C port, not a header, an actual port. So that probably connects either to some kind of hardware interface or another PC for diagnostic and development purposes. And then back to the front, I've been told that I should take the heatsink off of here. Yes, we'll put you back later. And have a look at this guy. ZX200, what are you? Interesting. USB, SATA, networking, and PCI Express switching. That's about it. And what that means is that this CPU is a highly integrated SoC without the platform controller hub that you would find on an Intel motherboard of this generation. So it's more like a Threadripper. In our search for identifying marks, we found some cool stuff. There's a bunch of probe points on this board, which are super useful for developers when they're trying to figure out what's going on with power delivery or on the various buses. And we found this little label, CHA001-C, next to the Centaur Technology logo, and maybe more importantly, this sticker. The QR code doesn't go anywhere, but Kodiak Assembly is a company that provides PCB assembly and other fabrication services, and this date has this board manufactured in September of 2019. That is not that long ago. Most PCs these days, and really for almost the last 25 years, use CPUs from AMD and Intel, a duopoly that they maintain by refusing to license the x86 instruction set to any other parties. But there is another. Centaur Technology was founded in 1995 as a subsidiary of IDT by former IBM fellow Glenn Henry to do what IBM didn't do. And the concept was simple. A small team building a low complexity, low cost, energy efficient desktop CPU for the then new sub $1,000 PC market. This became the Win chip. And it was modestly successful, mostly in markets outside of the US, offering adequate performance at half of the size of a contemporary Pentium-class CPU. Unfortunately, Intel took notice and did what Intel did best in the 90s, and absolutely crushed them. Centaur was ultimately acquired then alongside Cyrix by VIA Technologies in 1999. Their next CPU, the Cyrix 3, found little commercial success on the desktop, But in embedded systems, it was so popular that Mini ITX was developed specifically to show off its successor, the C3. Now, Intel, who had already sued VIA over chipset patents in the 90s, sued VIA again in 2001 for x86 patent infringement, and VIA countersued for the infringement of Centaur's patents. Ultimately, they both settled in 2003 with a 10-year cross-licensing agreement that stipulated that VIA/Centaur could continue creating x86 designs as long as they were not in any way compatible with Intel chipsets. A fun bit of trivia here is VIA used to make motherboard chipsets, and the settlement gave them until 2007 to stop doing that for Intel chips. So that explains how Centaur got away with building an x86 CPU, but it doesn't explain why they built it. And to find that out, we've got to take a closer look at what it is, starting with what it's not. It's not a CPU. It's an SoC, codenamed Centaur Hauls, or CHA. That's why our motherboard has no chipset on it. It's all on the chip itself. It's got up to 8 cores, clocked it up to 2.5 gigahertz, though 2.0 is stock on our chip, and it supports AVX512, kind of like AMD has done on their most recent Zen 4 architecture, in such a way that it doesn't require the chip to be downclocked like Intel's did at the time. The biggest piece, though, is an onboard AI accelerator codenamed Ncore. It added essentially no cost, but it could access the CPU's level 3 cache and system memory extremely quickly. It was meant to be the killer app for this platform, with an extremely high-speed, bidirectional 160 gigabyte per second connection to the CPU itself. That's more bandwidth than a PCIe Gen 6 by 16 slot. Unfortunately, while their idea for a low-cost AI-accelerated platform was pretty well timed, the actual execution, well, not so much. We'll get into that a little bit later. First, did I tell you this thing works? Let's fire it up. Even the fact they got as far as silicon power on means they were deep into development of this platform. Like, real work was done. And that is mind-blowing. The BIOS build date is 2021. Guys, that is 2.5 years ago. They were still developing for this thing, and just 2 months before Intel purchased Centaur's engineering staff from VIA. Man, I feel like a kid who just got dropped off at the playground. What do I go on first, the monkey bars or the merry-go-round? Now, because this is a debug board, there's a lot of items that go nowhere and do nothing, but there's some really cool stuff in here. Ooh, did it just turn off?
It sure did.
It did. What all is there for us to play with here? CPU configuration, there's our 2 gigahertz clock speed. Oh, non-fused CPU. Ah, fuses. Apparently there's a whole bunch of fuses that we can blow in here. And if you're not familiar, fuses can lock functionality like instruction sets or even CPU cache. And that's one of the ways that we get a lower end chip from a higher end chip. So theoretically, they could put a top spec chip in a board like this one, blow up the parts they don't need, and end up with any chip from the lineup. A concluder. Now hold on a sec, if I'm understanding this correctly, it changes the CPU ID to be whatever it is that I tell it to be? Intel probably wouldn't like this. Or AVX512. That would have been really useful for this kind of application. I wonder if this thing's a PlayStation 3 emulation monster. Demo board is just onboard LAN enable disable. I guess they hadn't put it in the proper category yet. This is surprisingly robust and finished looking. PCIe Gen 2 only though. This was toward the very end of PCIe Gen 2's life cycle. This is really important, setting DRAM timings, because oh my God, those default timings. I can see why you had to put it all in manually. For now, we're gonna leave all of this alone, including the ever so tempting the concluder button, and let Windows see the real deal. While we wait for it to boot, by the way, you can shop the real deal with YouTube Shopping and get 20% off of our backpack when you purchase through the shopping tag right here. You've seen how awesome this backpack is before, and we're excited to announce you can now buy the definitive edition of the LTT backpack. It's got the same 22 pockets and sleeves, the same convenient features like an AirTag pocket and RFID blocking passport pocket. It's got more than enough space for all of your tech and daily carry gear, and features a resilient and fully recycled exterior fabric. And new today, it ships with the bonded dual layer bottom and our upgraded titanium carabiner zipper pulls. Thanks to YouTube Shopping, we're offering a limited deal where if you buy it through their link here on YouTube, you can save 20%, which is $50. This is a limited offer, so grab it while you can. Hey, look at that, we're in Windows. The first thing you'll probably notice is we're running Windows 10. That's because there's no firmware TPM and no module that we were able to easily find for the header that's on the board. So Windows 10 then. We could try to bypass the lock for Windows 11, but I've been told realistically the system's slow enough on 10. Steam 100%s the CPU easily when downloading at, let's do a quick speed test. There it is, 2 gigahertz at super slow timings. We'll get these tweaked. We'll get these tweaked before we do any, oh my God. Sorry, I was about to say performance testing, but I guess I mean lack of performance testing. 350 megabit. That is not fast. This is cool though. It knows that it's Centaur technology, even has the right code name. It is often amazing to me how much information something like a CPU-Z is able to pull off of hardware that in the wild doesn't exist. In the mainboard tab, we see the chipset is made by Laszlo. That's a name that's going to come up later. Also, PCI Express 3.0. Now wait a second, it said PCIe Gen 2 in the BIOS, but the bus specs say Gen 3 here. Honestly, I would trust CPU-Z over that janky BIOS. And Gen 3 makes way more sense for that time period because we were on the cusp of Gen 4 by that point. Enough fooling around for now though. Emily's going to get this thing dialed in and we're going to do some performance testing. And sometime later, we're going to have an exclusive over at lmg.gg/floatplane of Emily going through everything that was changed. We've got, there we go. That's more like it. And I can drag a window around now. Yes, without it lagging behind me. I guess the first thing I want to do is run Cinebench R20. Look at this. I'm on the internet on a Centaur. Loads the way you'd expect. It's x86, right? There's some differences, but mostly, that is not fast. 3 hours later, almost there. 1660. To put that in context, the Ryzen 7 1700X, which was not even the top performing chip at the time, came out 7 years ago and is more than double that score. I'm afraid to see what's going to happen in gaming. I'm afraid to see what a single core run would look like. How many points was that?
No.
No points. I bet we can game though. We'll just play older games, lighter games. Play Dave the Diver. Oh my goodness. And this isn't even because it has a mechanical hard drive in it. This is just how fast it is. In fairness, it does work. Our next game is Doug Hugg'em, which was created as a prank, I guess, to generate fake outrage around the time of the launch of Duke Nukem Forever. And they said they would do it 13 years ago and actually followed through. Here it is in 2024. It's time to generate some positivity, because games are just too negative. There are sharks in the sky. Let's help this granny across the street, shall we? Okay, here we go, Mima. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Come on, pick up the pace, lady. Yeah, okay, she'll make it.
I can't stop frowning. I think it's some kind of turn that frown upside down.
That's not the same voice actor as Duke Nukem, is it?
It is. That is John St. John.
Oh, now's the perfect opportunity to find out if that USB-C port is in fact a functioning USB-C port. Can I plug a controller into it? Yes. Now that doesn't mean that it isn't for diagnostics. It very likely is, but it also just happens to be a USB-C port. It's a super cool game. It's a roguelite hockey game. You go on a campaign to restore hockey to its former glory. There's all kinds of cool upgrades, like you can throw your stick at opponents, you can fart and push them away so they can't body check you. Pretty fun, and with the latest beta supports 5-player local multiplayer, so you can have every player on your team be human controlled. Just don't lose a game or your campaign's over. Hey, look at this. In the lightest possible games, we can get 150 frames per second. No problem, buddy. Here we go, here we go, here we go! Let's go, come on! Bleh. You know what? It feels pretty laggy though, I'm not gonna lie. It does not feel like 150 frames per second. The point is, other than being slow, there's nothing that really sets this thing apart from any other computer that I've used. It works.
Try Cinebench 2024.
No AVX2. I know where we're going with this. I'm gonna pretend to be a different CPU now, right? That is where the concluder comes in. As far as we can tell, some applications, instead of checking the instruction set support, are just checking a list of, I don't know, CPU models that are known to support the instruction set, and if you don't happen to have it, they're just spitting out an error, and Cinebench 24 would be one of them. Because according to CPU-Z, this CPU does in fact support AVX2, but I guess we're about to find out. If we artificially change the reporting ID to skylake-x, will it run? I mean, probably won't run, but it might walk. Oh, that's hilarious. Oh, Intel would not be happy about this. It even shows an Intel logo. It even misreports. Does it even misreport the socket? That's super weird. Oh my God, this core speed. Okay, it has no idea what's going on. Why does it say PCIe Gen 4 now? There's no way that's right. Hold on a second. What is our GPU reporting? Oh, this is fascinating. No, it's Gen 3. Wait, but it reports a bus interface of Gen 4. Is it Gen 4?
Not
Can't
to my
be.
knowledge.
Yes?
No.
No? What? And of course, Cinebench 2024 totally launches. In an effort to get the N-core neural processor working, we fired up Linux as well, but we had even more problems in Linux than we did in Windows. It takes forever to boot, the desktop is even laggier, and our PCIe devices seem to run at incorrect speeds. Also, no public driver seems to exist for the N-core, so we weren't able to test it, and the Phoronix test suite takes forever just to download, let alone to run. With how customizable Linux is, I think this is one of, if not the first time, that we've had some weird esoteric piece of hardware that works less completely or less reliably on Linux than it does on Windows, but hey, even champions have bad days. All of which is interesting, but doesn't answer our big questions. How did this come to be, and why didn't it get over the finish line? In order to answer that, we've got to do a little bit of a history lesson. The final commercially released design from Centaur was the VIA Nano X2, codenamed Isaiah. That came out back in 2011 and was a dual-core chip meant for Pico ITX systems and meant to compete with Intel Atom. Now, in the 2010s, pretty much everyone, Intel included, saw the writing on the wall for embedded x86, not to mention that VIA's patent cross-license deal with Intel, which included the x86 license, was only guaranteed until 2013. So, that same year then, VIA started the Zhaoxin joint venture with the Shanghai municipal government, where SoCs would be developed for the Chinese market, where pesky things like IP licensing deals don't matter quite as much. But, in spite of their obvious attempts to safeguard their future by investing in China, they weren't out of the global market just yet. In 2014, rumors circulated of a possible Centaur x86/ARM hybrid project, but nothing came of it, and then in 2019, they announced the CHA, the SoC that we're looking at today. The idea was that it would be positioned against Intel's Xeon CPUs at an estimated price of just $500 to $1,000, which sounds like a pretty compelling story. But the headwinds were many, and they were mighty. In 2019 alone, Intel's low-cost Cascade Lake launched, Intel's high-end Ice Lake SP was due to launch, and AMD's EPYC Rome launched with incredible core counts that absolutely dwarfed what Centaur Hauls was expected to deliver in the second half of 2020. Not only that, but GPUs and AI accelerator cards had already taken over the task of machine learning from the CPU, and the performance was not even close. Don't believe me? Ask Jensen Huang's accountant. NVIDIA's Tesla T4, which was a downclocked RTX 2070 Super, was $2,000 in 2019, which is a lot more than one of these, but absolutely stomps all over the N-Core's performance, even with an older 4-core Skylake CPU that cost only $213. So generously, if we assume that Centaur Hauls launched at $500, that Xeon plus T4 combo is 4.5 times the price for 4 to 5 times the performance, which actually sounds pretty reasonable until you consider that going the other route, you'd get a platform from a company that's launched more than one commercial chip in the past 8 years. You could use CUDA, so you have broader compatibility, and you could throw consumer GPUs in these things for a lower price too. So, yeah. They had a good idea for 2017, but by 2019, the industry was just moving too fast for it to make any sense. And by 2021, much of Centaur's engineering was sold over to Intel, leaving VIA with mainly just Centaur's intellectual property, which kind of makes you wonder if Intel had a hand in Centaur Hauls' cancellation. Centaur Hauls was, as far as we know, the final SoC designed in-house by Centaur, and much of its DNA is actually shared with the Xiaoxin chips, like the one that we looked at some time ago, which makes it kind of a missing link between where Xiaoxin is today and the Isaiah-based VIA Nano. And unfortunately, that's all it is, a missing link. To our sponsor.
iFixit. That loud buzzing noise coming from your console, that's probably bad news. But it's not the end of the world because iFixit has the help you need. From the newest PlayStation to the Xbox 360, which, yes, I'm sorry to tell you, is considered retro now. They have the parts to help you breathe new life into your favorite console. And I mean it, they got like everything. Replacement faceplates, power supplies, thumbsticks, screens. They got it. Plus, with their comprehensive guides, all you need is a little DIY spirit, I don't have sleeves to roll up, and the daunting task of taking apart your console becomes a breeze. So do your part to help reduce e-waste by checking out iFixit's game console parts at the link down below.
If you guys enjoyed this video, why not check out the one where we looked at one of those Xiaoxin CPUs. At the time, we were looking at it going, how did these guys get an x86 license? And, well, they kind of didn't, I guess.